So welcome everybody to the April koha-US Web Dev State. Barbara said she had something to share, so we'll start with that.
Okay. So let me share my screen. So do you see the new interface?
Yep.
So I'm trying to get my people looking at this and starting to get used to things. And one comment that was made was you have the search box and then all your selections are like way over here on the right hand side of the screen because they're all on one line. And they're like, well, I'll be, moving my cursor from here to there when I want to switch screens, and I'll be back, searching here and I have to move my cursor over there. So they wanted to know if we could have it more like the way it is now. So I just played around with some things, and I don't know if it's the best way to do it, but, moved the tabs underneath so that they wouldn't have as much movement across the screen with their selections. And then they wanted some separation between the search bar. They felt like it was all things were too visually too crunched up together for them. So I just added some padding and stuff like that. Just, trying to make things so that they'll feel comfortable with it. And then I knew that I was going to increase the font size because everybody said that's just too small. So just playing around with a few different things, and what I've got in there at the moment is the font size, obviously, and then just making some this was, I think, display flex, and I just changed it to something that broke it apart and changed some margins and things just to see what things would look like. So that's all I have.
Yeah, I'm eager to get that on our test server because there are small tweaks I want to make too, for sure, before we push it out to our people. Although my people said they didn't want to upgrade during summer reading, so they've requested that we push our upgrade all the way to August. So I guess I'll have lots of time to play with it on my test server.
That may be what we do as well. I'm not sure yet.
My plan is to let them use it for a while before I get reports on what they say they don't like about it. So instead of letting them test on it and hearing, oh, I think the font size might be too small, I'll let them work with it for a while before I decide to move things around.
Yeah, and I want to rigorously have them test it in our test server over the summer. I want to get a test plan, make sure that they're doing stuff, incentivize it somehow, so that I've got people actually poking at it, using it before we make the big change, but make any other changes.
My experience is that you can set up the test server, you can say go there and test it, and they won't.
Right. It's the
They
incentivization
won't actually
that
use
I need.
it. Yeah, they won't actually use it until it's on the system and it's in production. And then for the first 3 days, they'll scream about how this button isn't in the same place it used to be, or this thing has changed slightly. And it will be like, oh my God, I can't do my job anymore. Oh my, this is so horrible. And then you go back a week later, and it's like, I was complaining about what? I don't remember that. So, that's my experience in the past, is they freak out about tiny little things for the first 2 or 3 days. And then after a month, they don't even remember that it was something that they freaked out about. So
Yeah, I agree for the most part, but there are things that bug me too. like the font size for sure is too small. Like that's gonna be a definite change. And I agree that the search bar feels claustrophobic up there, but I may make them suffer with it for a while before I make changes. There's also like I noticed that the tabs on the details view are like dark green when they're not selected, and for some reason that just really messes with my brain. Like and they need to be de-emphasized and they're emphasized.
Well, I have the ability, since I'm just a single library, sometimes I get to just, say, this is what we're doing. This is how it is.
I
I
do
don't
the
have
same
as many
things.
people yelling at me as y'all do.
I do the exact same thing. I think say this is the way it's going to be, but I do it for 50 libraries instead of just one.
That's why we bill our consortium as not a consortium. This is a service that we offer and we have the final say, but generally the JSON dataship allows some input from its users.
The changes really are minimal. It's the search bar. That's like basically it. Everything in the templates, maybe some buttons change colors, stuff like that. But like the templates are relatively unchanged.
All the cataloging tools are in a different place.
Yeah.
Yes, you're right. That's right. Cataloging tools moved to their own homepage.
I can't find all the things that I used to use. They're gone. What happened to them?
And that's actually, I foresee as the biggest complaint from people is not the change to the search bar or anything like that, but that I used to go to tools and find this, and now it's in cataloging, and that is confusing.
Yeah, I try to make them feel bad for wanting to push it because I'm like, it's really not that big a deal. You'll get used to it. Nothing, functionality hasn't changed, but I am dealing with a lot of people, and I'm dealing with a lot of change averse people that are working the front line. And if it gets put in front of them while they've got like stacks of 50 books that kids are trying to check out, it's gonna like break some people completely. So that's why we're opting to delay it.
And that's why I'm opting not to delay it. So let's break those people and get them to retire.
That's a strategy. Is there other stuff we want to talk about today? I guess I did have a question for you, Lucas. I finally got back to poking at the kids OPAC stuff a little bit. If I want to upgrade that plugin or any plugin in general, is it just an open a ticket situation, or is there a way that we can do that on our end?
To upgrade the plugin?
Yeah.
You can do that on your end. I think if you, do you know how to find the latest version of a plugin?
Yeah. I see that I have an older version installed on my test server, and in the repo there it's newer. So
yeah, you just go to the Bywater repo on GitHub. You should be able to find the latest KPZ. You download that, and then all you should have to do is install it. And some plugins need you to restart Memcache Plaque, but this one, it shouldn't, because all it really is JavaScript.
okay.
Also, like I asked, I took a lot of your stuff and added it to the plugin. But in your case, that might cause a little, you might have some doubling up of things that could be problematic, but I'm sure you know how to solve that.
Right. Yeah, I was planning on
remove some of your own CSS, but I did make a update that put a lot of your cool design stuff in there.
Awesome. Yeah, I wanted to make more changes, so I figured I would like make a copy of my code and pull it all out and then see where it's at with the updates that you made, and then put back in the pieces that I still want. I'm like slowly moving through the different pages. So I started on the home page, and now I'm working on search results and trying to make those more how I want them. And then I need to work on the detail page some. I did find that if you put too much custom code in there, you get 400 errors when you try to save it.
Oh yeah, there's probably some limit to that block.
I found that if you like control click the save and exit button, it still saves. So I've been working around it.
Well, one thing is, maybe if you install the latest version, you will have to go through your CSS, but you might be able to eliminate a bunch of it.
Right. And that's another reason I wanted to get it updated.
And if you, again, if you're making neat changes, like I might want to take them, put them in there, so which would give you more space. So
sure, and I will definitely share what I come up with.
For the patron permissions plugin, I just found the repo on the Bywater GitHub site and cloned it and made some suggestions. I just, pushed some suggestions that Kyle added to the repo, just like a normal Git, push and pull situations. So
you clone it, and George, do you use a Koha testing Docker or something like that?
I cloned the plugin. It was the patron permissions modifier. I had already figured out on my system what needed to be changed, and so I just cloned it and then made the changes, and then did an update and created a branch, and then Kyle merged it in because they were good changes.
Cool.
So all the testing happened on my production system, which is the perfect way to test something.
Oh, I see. Did you took the JavaScript out, put it somewhere else, and then edited it, and then put it back?
Yeah, exactly.
In the repo, and then did a pull request.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
That sounds way too scary for me, George. I'd break something.
I just figured out what needed to be changed, and I changed it in the GitHub repo for the plugin, and did the pull request, and then Kyle merged it. So
yeah, it shouldn't be too scary too, because if you do a pull request and Kyle accepts it, then it's Kyle's if it's wrong.
Yeah, exactly. If I had screwed it up, Kyle wouldn't have merged it. So
I'm in the piece where you were like making changes and then testing those changes on your production server.
It was a pretty minor change, for that permissions plugin. When you looked at a patron that had that was attached to a permissions template, it would just, when you go to their permissions, it would say this patron's permissions is controlled by a template, and it would hide all of the permissions. And so all I did was I changed one little tiny piece of code that instead of hiding all of those permissions, it showed you those permissions, but it wouldn't let you change them. That way you could see what the permissions that you had based on the template were without having to go back to the template to see what the permissions were. So it was a tiny change. It was like 1/2 of a line. So it was a really minor change. Not the crazy stuff you're doing to the kids plugin.
Yeah, we're still trying to decide. It's been a couple of weeks since I've worked on the children's OPAC, but we're still trying to decide whether we want them to place holds or not. And I haven't really gotten back to the youth staff on it, and we had to do budget, so we got put on back burner. And
yeah, one of the suggestions that my youth services consultant made was like, if you make it like a shopping experience, kids will love that. So if I can set that up with the cart bag thing, and where they're like picking what they want and placing a hold, I think that'll work. But it is tricky because you hit that wall where they need to log in.
Yeah, the more functions you try to give access to, the more work you have to do, because then you got all these new pages that need work.
So I think right now we just want to get it to like a browsing level, and then if we decide we want to add functionality, build up.
Do you still only use it in a test environment, or do you have actual users using it?
I haven't had anybody using it yet. It's not quite there yet, but I do have some libraries that are ready. Like they're very excited about it. So
That's cool.
I have testers on the line. I just need to find some time to finish off those changes I want to make before we put it in front of some people.
That's
And-
great. I'd like to see more people use it. I think I have 3 libraries only using it, so and they're not giving a ton of feedback. So would love to hear what people think.
And we're thinking once we get the youth staff using it at a certain point, we're gonna maybe put it on one of our children's OPAC stations as the default. And, you know, have the others just like what they're used to. We've got 3 OPACs over there. And, you know, kind of see what people's response is. And if they freak out, they still have the other
Yeah,
OPACs they can
we
use.
haven't as part of the family place stuff, they bought an iPad kiosk for up front. So I've been trying to design sort of around using it on an iPad and as touch. So that's gonna be one of the first places we put it and test it out.
Maybe I'll put it out there before summer reading club starts, and then you have a whole bunch of
You get a huge data
people
set
that can
then.
give you
Yeah.
feedback.
Trying to think of anything else that I did fun in the last month. It's been a busy month, so I don't know. I guess I could look at my jQuery and see if anything pops out.
Jason, do you all use there's jQuery that's been floating around probably in the jQuery library that when you're on the staff results page, there's a location column and it shows you all of the library's holdings, all of the various libraries holdings. There's jQuery to limit that to your logged in branch. Do you use that?
Yeah. You mean along the right side, the collapsing and expanding of locations?
Yeah.
Yeah, we use that.
You might want to look at that for 2211. I found that it might break. I completely redid it.
Okay.
Just
Yeah,
tweaked.
it broke in 2205 and Christopher and I changed some stuff. So yeah, I'll definitely check that in 2211 after our test server upgrades.
It's broken several times over the years. It's been around since.
I'd like to maybe introduce it as an enhancement and get it into Koha. But I did rewrite it. But I rewrote it in a way that instead of going to each individual item and expanding and collapsing per item, there's just one at the top of the page for expanding and collapsing everything on the page.
Yeah, I have here. I'll show you what I've got.
Yeah, I've got a button that does that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is what my results look like. You can click the, if my computer would work, you can click the headings here to expand individually, but there's also a button that.
Oh, you do have a button. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
And in 2205, something changed, like a class changed or a span changed or something. Like
Yeah,
what
that's
broke.
always the problem with jQuery like that is one span change can make it where you have to revisit the whole thing.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that looks cleaner.
I started doing some bootstrap badges to make the the different parts look different, make
Yeah,
them a little cleaner.
coming to really love Bootstrap. Like I had to work on our system website the other day and we don't have Bootstrap on, and I'm like, oh, I could do this as a modal if I could just use Bootstrap, but it needs a lot of work anyways. But I do enjoy having that tool set and having it up to date and knowing how to use it at least a little bit.
I don't even know if you remember that working on that see all items and that location stuff. That was at the first koha-US conference in Wenatchee, Washington. And it was really collaborative because Coeur d'Alene had already been doing something similar. And Heather here at NEKLS had already been doing something similar. And Nick was still in Vermont and he was all doing something similar. And they all worked together to make it what it became really useful. So
It seems like now we as a community have 3 or 4 different versions of that
yeah,
floating around.
And
Yeah.
I think with the growth of consortium, consortia is coming on to Koha even
Yeah,
more.
that's-
I think adding it to the base code would be a good idea as an option at
So
least.
we can stop having to adjust our code every release.
I see Christopher joined us. Do you have anything exciting to talk about in the realm of web dev, Christopher?
I just wanted to join the conversation. It sounded like you were talking about the results and the library showing over on the right side. If I'm,
Yeah.
yeah, sorry, I was late. I've been working on some other projects, but no, I would love to see that normalized into code, or at least a plugin. We've been using that from the get-go, and it's, I mean, yeah, for consortiums, that's a no-brainer need there, because otherwise those results screens get just
Huge.
chaotic. Yeah.
the thing that I remember having to do with it after it was really developed in Coeur d'Alene is that I had to come up with a way to make it work at Latah County Library, where in that consortium in Valnet, there were 7 branches for Latah County Library. So if one of those 7 had it, I wanted all of them to show. And Prairie, the River Library District had 9 libraries. And so if one of their libraries had it, all 9 of those needed to show. And that was something I had to work on. I think here I've got it so that if you're at one of the Prairie River libraries, they're not Prairie River, Prairie Hills School District, that if you're at one of those libraries, they all show when you find one. I think I've got it set up that way, but that's something that would be an issue for us. And maybe I don't have that set up that way because I see it at more than, yeah.
Are those particular libraries set up as a library search group, or do you just do it all with jQuery?
I don't remember, but I don't have it set up right now. I have, I logged in as Prairie Hills Axtell, and if I go to show all items, I can see that that's the local one. But then I've got other Prairie Hills book schools here, so maybe that was something that I didn't fix after the last upgrade, because this did break the last upgrade, or 2105 or 20, something like that. It broke. But that would be something, if they could be controlled by the search group, that would be helpful in any kind of development if you're going to put that into code.
Right.
Because there are consortiums that have groups inside of the group.
I would love, within the branches, you can define IP addresses, and I would love to see some smart displaying of information based off of that. Like if you're pulling up something in a staff side or OPAC side, and this is something that you could opt to turn on or off for each branch or whatever, but based on that IP address, if you're coming from that IP address and you want to just show initially just the results from that particular library associated with that IP address that you're viewing from, you could do that, and then you'd have a link to reveal more options. It seems like we have pieces in place where we could do that. I've found no value to adding the IP addresses to the libraries at this point, because I think the only thing that applies to, if I remember correctly, is if you turned on a setting in Koha to limit staff logins to those addresses. I think that's the only thing that IP address is used for at this time, but I could be mistaken.
I think you're right. I think that's the only thing that the IP address is really used for right now, is for secure login. And that's why we don't have it turned on, is because none of our libraries, I shouldn't say none of our libraries, most of our libraries don't have a static IP address. So we can't leverage that.
It would be useful for the libraries that do have those static IP addresses. If you had a static IP address, you could put it in there, and then if that address exists, then it would adhere to just show the items from that library's collections in the results, and add a link to show more. That would be extremely helpful. I think that would streamline results a bit, and you could have settings to do you want to show everything or just things from your IP address if it exists.
Looks like there's some bugs out there. 28658 to use the branch IP on the OPAC to try to guess which libraries to search first.
What was that number again?
I just put it in the chat. It's 28658. Keep seeing that one floating around.
I'm still, I still wish that it was easier to navigate people towards a branch, even if they're not logged in, if people are clicking on a link to the catalog from a website, if we had a branch ID embedded in that URL, that it would act towards that particular library, that could simplify that and not rely so heavily on an IP address.
Yeah, if it was coming from an external site and you put a param in the URL, you could just then use JavaScript in Koha to say if this param is so-and-so, select this library.
Yeah, that would be ideal. I mean, because if people are navigating to the catalog through a library, then you know that that's kind of the library that they're gravitating towards. And
Right.
then, you could have, you could have it, basically default to, that library choice and drop downs. You could have it default to those particular, that particular library's items in the results, and then say reveal more, that type of thing. That would be cool. If we could just get, even if we just started off with saying, hey, let's start incorporating a parameter, a library parameter in the URL, and it doesn't do anything, from the get-go, at least that would give us something, those of us that hack, something to work with. And then down the road, we could add features that actually utilize that. I don't know how easy it would be to incorporate a parameter in the URL that stays glued to the URL, that doesn't necessarily do anything.
You mean even when you move from page to page on the OPAC?
Yeah. Something that you could put in there that's not going to affect the outcome of the URL, but can be referred to.
Cookie, maybe.
Yeah, it would be nice to have something that could be persistent. I'm wondering.
You could maybe set a cookie.
Yeah, that's another approach. I mean, you could do that. I don't have any experience, like if I wanted to take advantage of that, how to look for that branch in a cookie. But yeah. Then you have then you'd have the added problem of, okay, how do you force, if somebody's clicking on your catalog link from your library webpage, how do you set that cookie? That, so you have to approach that if you're doing it from the cookie stance, and then how to look that up. URLs are a little bit easier to deal with.
Right, except for the persistence of them, because then as soon as you get to the main page of your OPAC and click somewhere else, you lose your param. So maybe you could, from your website, set a certain param, and then when you land on the homepage, set a cookie for the session. It says, hey, you're belonging to, or seems like you probably belong to this branch, and then do stuff based on that. I don't know, maybe.
More than anything, this seems to be like a session where we're giving Lucas ideas for how he can change Koha in the future.
You figured out the real reason.
Definitely with the collapsing and expanding of libraries in the search results is something that I would like to add.
I have totally unrelated question, comment, idea. When you search in Google and there's the thing on the right that says, hey, this book's available in your library. It seems like that's being done with JSON. So has anybody tried to make that work with Koha before?
Say that again.
So when you search in Google, on the right side, it'll give you suggestions, and one of them is check your library or whatever. It seems like you could set up a data feed from Koha to Google so that your results would show there. So I just wondered if anybody had played with that idea at all.
I didn't even realize that Google did that until just now.
I didn't either.
Yeah, I'm actually not paying attention to Koha. I'm at Google right now trying to get a result that says, check in the library.
Yeah, so like when I search for Cat in the Hat on the right, I get the Sunflower e-library because a library 2 counties over subscribes to that and they've got it. So I feel like since it's just using JSON data, we should be able to feed that out from Koha and get ourselves to show up there.
Oh yeah, you have to scroll down a little bit on my results under the about, and then it says get book and it gives Audible, Kindle Store. Doesn't even list our library. It says Washington Anytime Library or Spokane County Library. I don't know how you get added to
Right.
that list.
That's
Yeah.
the piece that needs developed, I would say, or added.
I also am getting libraries that aren't particularly close to where I actually am.
Yeah, it makes me wonder if it's searching WorldCat,
Could be.
because all the libraries I see in my results are WorldCat libraries, and none of mine are really. A couple of them have
Actually,
incomplete holdings in WorldCat.
when I hover over the links for the 2 libraries showing, they're showing us overdrive links.
Yeah, I'm getting overdrive links in my results. So if overdrive can do it, Koha can do it, right?
Sure. Still makes me wonder, why isn't our overdrive showing up in it? It's like, I'm wondering if it's an added feature or something.
There was something, and I can't even remember what it was called, that I went to several years ago, and it was adding something to your catalog record, it seemed like. And then I just don't even remember the details, but it was like an extra thing you had to do. And we weren't ready to do it at that time. And I think then it became something you had to pay a company to do. But maybe it was a WorldCat discovery thing, or it's very vague, but it sounds familiar.
I found some Google documentation if anybody wants to look at it. So it looks like we would have to create a feed that data out from Koha, probably have some sort of developer thingy on the Google side to link it all together. Seems like a project that might be worthwhile.
Interesting. Yeah, I'll have to look at that.
I look forward to when somebody figures this out and I can add it to my system without doing anything at all.
And I think this is a little bit of what I was thinking of. I put a link in there for an OCLC press release from last year.
Just saying, if OCLC can do it, we can do it.
Yeah, I'd prefer it going through Koha rather than OCLC, because it's a little bit more direct.
For sure.
Just a tiny bit less evil.
Less expensive.
So you were asking me what I am working on. We had I have a couple things that I'm working on. One thing I just finished. We had gone through the contemplation about how to deal with long overdue items in our system since we started with Koha. When we had things go long overdue, lost, the system after 30 days charges the patron for the item, and it still hangs out on their list of checkouts. This was problematic for libraries that wanted to get rid of items that have been hanging out on a patron's account forever, and there's no sign of it ever coming back, but we wanted to keep the charge on the account, but get rid of the item record. And so libraries, if you removed the item, it removed it from the patron account and removed the charge. We wanted to retain that charge, and so the way around that is libraries had to remember, okay, if I'm going to remove this item, I have to change the status to something else like lost. It retains the charge but disconnects it from the checkouts, and then they can delete the item. That's problematic if you're not following the workflow exactly. And so after talking with Bywater for a while, we ended up going with the option that when it goes long overdue lost, it automatically removes it from the patron's checkouts, but retains that charge. And that's worked really nice. We've had to rewrite some of our long lost overdue reports for the way that they're looking for this information. So we've had to work around that a little bit. We've also had to add it used to be that if an item was long lost overdue and returned, when it was checked in, of course it removes the fine just like it does now. But before we made that change, you still had a link to the patron. We could go to that patron when checking in and make sure that charge is removed, just double check some things, the anal things that librarians do. And that link disappeared, so I had to work. I was working trying to figure out an API way of putting that link back in there, couldn't figure it out. I ended up having to do it based off of a report, but we added that last borrower back in on the check-in screen so that we could link to that if we needed to. But another issue that we ran into was that when things were long lost overdue, it was very evident when you're trying to check out to a patron, you can say, oh, you've got overdue stuff. Now those overdues are removed from the screen, and there's, unless you're paying attention to the message in the corner that they owe X amount of dollars, it looks like the account's okay until you go and check things out where we block things at a certain dollar amount. So it was a small issue, but that message didn't stand out to the clerks very well. And what I've done in the past with our overdue items, if somebody has items that are overdue but not not blocking, not outright blocking and saying you can't check out anything, I would turn the barcode text field pink, just to make it more evident, hey, there's issues with the account. You'll be able to proceed with an override, but this stuff should be addressed. Well, now that overdue is not in the list, it doesn't do that with the box, and so I've had to I added some API to determine, okay, they've got a balance over X amount. Let's turn that box pink. but also I put a placeholder in the barcode field that says O's and then the balance. So that turned out pretty cool. So I had to work around that, but so I did that, and I had some good responses from that. It makes it more evident that even though it's not blocking them from checking out, there are issues with the account that need to be addressed. So I did that. That's one thing that I've been working on. The other thing that I'm looking at, I am wanting to, I want to play more with some code that I wrote back. I can't even remember what conference it was, but at a conference I wrote some code to add placards to the OPAC checkout screen. So if you search for certain things, like if it looks like somebody's looking for or searching for newspapers in our catalog, a placard comes up and talks about our newspaper database. Or if there's searching for languages, it shows a placard saying, hey, you might be, if you're looking for languages, check out this database, kind of thing. So I wrote that a long time ago, and it's nice and everything. If you want to update it, you have to kind of decipher the jQuery that I wrote for it to add to or update it. It would be nice if this was a plugin. I'd like to develop it as a plugin, but for me to get there, I'm going to have to learn how to set up and maintain a Docker instance for creating an environment that I can fool around with that stuff in. And I haven't had any experience doing that. But my last development was done via DevBox, which is kind of going the way of the dodo bird because of Docker. And so I'm having to learn, I have to learn something new and find the time to do it. And the videos that are out there are great, but they assume that some other pieces like Git and to move forward in that. And then the video demo also shows it in a Mac environment. And Jason and I and Fred were talking about this yesterday a little bit, but there's nothing that really shows you how to do it in a Windows environment. And it sounds like there might be some complications even doing it in a Windows environment. And that's a gap that needs to be looked at. I'm going to see about koha-US, investigating this more to figure out, can it be done, and educate people on how to do it. But we have a lot of people in the Koha community that are in the Windows environment, and so it's great that it's it's being demonstrated in a Mac environment, maybe works in a Linux environment, but we really need to bridge this gap where most of the people that want to help are working in a Windows environment, and we need to be able to do that.
One of the you were talking about, to go back to your workflow for long overdue items. When I got here to NEKLS, we had just started a process where things go from long overdue. At 45 days overdue, an item automatically switches to lost. And the status we use is called lost, more than 45 days overdue. And when they become lost, they're immediately removed from the patron's card. And that was working out really well for us for a long time, because when an item went lost, the workflow that we have is the item goes lost and the patron gets billed and the item is removed from their account. And then 13 months later, any item that's been lost, that has any lost or missing status for more than 13 months, at the end of that time, it automatically gets deleted. Because that was the issue that we had when I got here in 2016, is that the bigger libraries had come up with processes for what to do after an item went lost. They had enough staff that they could go in and delete those old things. But the smaller libraries would just let them stay lost. And so we had, like, you know, close to 20,000 items in the catalog that were lost. So when people would search for things, they would get all these results that, you know, had been overdue for forever.
Yeah.
So we came up with this process that they get moved through the system and they get deleted after a certain length of time automatically. And it saves the smaller libraries a ton of time. And that was working out pretty well for us. And the issue that we had is if somebody comes in and they've got a book that they had a late fee on, there would be something in the description field that said, this is the title. You know, after the item's deleted, it would leave information in the description like the title and the due date and the barcode number. And then a developer had the idea, let's put the barcode number in a different field in the overdues in the patron's fines. And then what happens then is when the item gets deleted, that barcode number, since it's been moved into a separate field and is linked to the item, when the item gets deleted, that barcode number isn't saved in the description. So that's one of the things that's coming up in
2211 is going to give
yeah,
you the ability to add that back.
you can define what things get put into that description in the fines.
Which is nice for us because we also want to know
Who owned it, which library
who owned it, who
to,
gets the money.
Yeah,
So,
this gives
yeah.
us a lot of flexibility to define what's going to be saved in that description. So I didn't know if you were aware that that was happening. So it sounds like you already know what's going on there.
Yeah, yeah. So what mechanism were you using to automatically delete those things after 13 months?
That was one of the last things Heather did before she left, is she got Bywater to rewrite there's a script that was written for us, because the issue was that there are certain libraries that this script that we had written is like it's like the long overdue script or something. It's one of the cron jobs, but it was written that just everything after a certain point in time would become marked lost and removed from the patron's account. And so they added some flexibility into that, so it doesn't affect. The script has been rewritten so that it has switches for like borrower categories, and I think there might be switches in there for libraries. But there's some extra switches in there so that our script doesn't affect certain types of borrowers, particularly at the school district and at the professional level, like the ILL accounts that our libraries use. Those items never get moved from long overdue to lost. And then the other script is just one that I don't know what it's called, but it deletes items based on what their status is and when the status was changed last. And I don't know what that cron job is called. But we've got it set so that anything more than 13 months, if it's based on the lost on date. If it has any kind of lost status and it's had that for more than 13 months, it gets deleted. If it's got a withdrawn status for more than 13 months, those get deleted. And it seems like there might be one other set of conditions. I'd have to look and dig around, but I think there's 3 different conditions that, you know, if an item has that situation for more than 13 months, they're deleted automatically. And I think it runs once a week. I think it's like every Sunday morning it runs. And then the same is true, any items that are more than 15 days old and have not had an item attached, any bibliographic records that are more than 2 weeks old that don't have an item attached to them, they're automatically deleted. Those biblios. So
It's interesting that you got, or that she got Bywater to run a script to do that, because I had talked to Bywater about I do something once a month, and it doesn't matter how frequently I do it. It's basically the same thing. I clean up our patrons, and
Yeah.
I go in there and I permanently delete patrons that have been expired for a couple years. So they've been expired, so their account is good for 2 years and it expires, and if it's expired for 2 years, then we just delete the account. So I do that, and of course, the system knows not to delete them if there's stuff that's outstanding on it.
Right.
I asked them, can you just automate this? And they were very hesitant about doing anything like that.
I asked the same thing about deleting expired patrons after a certain amount of time, and the reluctance wasn't that there isn't a script that does that. The reluctance was that the script that exists doesn't move them from borrowers to deleted borrowers. It moves them from borrowers and just deletes them out of the system permanently.
Which is what I do anyways.
I don't do it that way, but they said that, I don't remember who I talked to, this has been several years ago. They said they don't like to do that, and they're really hesitant to do it because it's permanent. And that way, if somebody calls back, if somebody gets deleted on Wednesday and somebody calls on Thursday and wants them added back, they have to say, no, we can't add it back, they're gone.
Yeah, and I'd probably retain those patrons if they had been expired for like 5 days or something like that, but they've been expired for 2 years, and it's like,
yeah,
that's tough.
We talked about
over.
We still talked about doing a video on our different processes and the reason we didn't do it is because the last upgrade broke part of my process. So remember that batch patron modification. So we need to still do a video about that.
Yeah.
But the script for deleting long overdue items and long missing items, long lost items, and long withdrawn items, and those, they don't pull them from the system completely. They just push them into deleted biblios and deleted items.
Yeah, I wouldn't have a problem retaining the deleted patrons for a little while, but for me to get there, we have a bug that we're talking about, how to retain deleted things in Koha.
Yeah.
Right now we're sticking them in different tables, which breaks a bunch of links. And so it's like, okay, yeah, great, we're putting that stuff in other tables, but if we want to undo that, that's a big mess for whoever to undo it, and it still doesn't cleanly restore things. And so there's a discussion about moving away from separate tables and just flagging the records with a deleted on date, and then if that date exists in that field, to the system it looks like it's deleted, but it doesn't break anything, which would be ideal. And then if we have to undo it, basically it's just removal of that date, and they're right back where they started. And that to me would be ideal, but I have to be there before I say, okay, well, I'll retain those deleted patrons for X amount of days or whatever. But if I do that now, it's like, okay, I'm maintaining the patron table, but now I've got to also maintain that deleted patron table, in that, after a certain amount of time, that needs to be cleaned up, because otherwise that table is just growing.
Bywater has a script running on my deleted patron table, deleted borrowers, that anything that's in there for more than 13 months, it just automatically deletes.
And, I'm all for that. I would love to be able to automate a lot, but what's frustrating to me is that a lot of this stuff is done on the back end, and I can't go and refer to things and look at, okay, well, this is how this is set up, this is how this is set up. It's all in Bywater's hands and I can't see any of that. So if I forget something, if I haven't written it down or updated my information about that, it's like, I don't necessarily know what's going on. Whereas, anytime I have a question about, okay, how did we have this set up? I can go look at the system preferences and say, okay, this is how we have it set up. And I don't have to bug anybody. And I can easily refer to something and I don't have to notate something somewhere.
I don't feel bad about bugging them.
So I'm looking
if you
where we can have that stuff all in the same place and at least have something to refer to so we can see what scripts are in place and how
Yeah.
often we're cleaning up this or that or whatever. Because
I think at least a couple of times a year I ask Bywater, could you send me a copy of what's currently in my cron tab file, and they don't have a problem with that. So
yeah.
then I
I
just
know-
have to decipher it.
I've seen bugs, I think, out there. It'd be nice if you could go to your about page and just at least see what crons are running, what time
Yeah.
they run.
That'd be nice.
Yeah, it would be a start to be able to see that stuff. It would be even better if there was an interface so we could actually set some
Mhm.
settings.
Administers that stuff yourself to some extent.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I understand that there are certain things you could do to break things. You probably shouldn't have that ability, but for some basic things,
Sure.
if there were some interfaces that gave you safe parameters to work with, that would be good.
Barbara just put the bug in the chat.
Yeah.
It's an old one.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think it'd be nice just to have the about information include what crons are running, because like I said, about twice a year I'll say to Bywater, can you send me a copy of my cron tab file? And one of the nice things about our cron tab file, at least I'm sure it's probably that way with all of them, is that they usually note which ticket is related to a change in the cron tab. So if you're not sure why something changed, there's usually a note there that says RT, that has an RT number, so you can go back and see, which fool decided on this change. Then you go back and look at it and go, I guess it was me.
There has been quite a few things too where where Koha's moved triggers on cron jobs from the actual command line to something that
Yeah.
you can control via system preference. But there's still a lot that you can't.
I know for me, today's the 20th, so tomorrow is the 11th anniversary of the night that I stayed up till like 1 o'clock in the morning with Ruth Bavasset on the phone saying, okay, what do I do now? And then the next morning, Ruth was, doing all the crazy stuff with Koha. And then on Monday morning, we opened and we had switched from Voyager to Koha. So that was 11 years ago this weekend.
wow.
And there's a lot that's changed in those 11 years.
Yeah.
Koha is a lot different.
For a product, I mean, I can't think of many products that have changed as radically as Koha has over the years. There's Koha grows and meets the expectations where you have to hope and pray that something's going to happen with the out of the box product that's not open source.
I still think back to Voyager when I started working at Latah County Library and we were using Voyager, and how it, the one time that I got to speak to somebody that worked for Equinox, or for, what was the name of the company that managed Voyager? It wasn't Equinox. I don't even remember the name of their company. It was, but Ex Libris, that was it.
Ex Libris, that's it.
Yeah. And I said, here's a crazy idea. After a patron places a request, we'd like maybe to be able to change the pickup location. Because if they choose the wrong pickup location, the way you had to do it now is you had to go in, cancel the request, replace it, with the new location and then move it up and down the holds queue to get it in the right spot. And then like 3 years later, the guy said, oh, we added that feature that you wanted. And it was the wrong, and it didn't work right. And it wasn't the feature